And welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to see this many friendly faces, even if some of them are pictures. So many friendly faces, and all of you joining us here to talk skills systems and statewide governance today. There's lots of great things to discuss. While I go through the agenda, I'm first going to ask folks to just join us in the chat. Tell us where you're coming from. You can interpret that as what organization you're coming from or where in the world you're joining us from. And then just to, keep the mood up and keep everyone thinking about the Olympics. I know they just wrapped up, but just to keep everyone thinking about the Olympics, tell us a gold medal moment you had sometime this winter. Maybe that's shoveling snow, maybe that's actual athletics, maybe that's something totally different based on where you're coming from. But tell us where you're coming from, tell us a gold medal moment. And I'm going to keep going and talk us through the agenda, what we're going to be doing through this hour as people start to give us that information in the chat. Awesome. So, you are joined today by myself, Emily Shyness, the Senior Director of Skills Systems at CBEN, and my awesome and wonderful colleague, Dr. Amber Garrison Duncan, who's CBEN's Executive Vice President. We're going to talk through quite a few things today. First, we're going to start with really grounding into this idea of talent marketplaces. What are marketplaces? What are talent marketplaces? What are public marketplaces? Talking you through how we think about that, what the framework is, and why CBEN is thinking about that in general. Then we want to dig into a little bit of as we think about states creating talent marketplaces, how are they grounding the decisions about those talent marketplaces against North Star goals, big, hairy, audacious goals around the talent in their state, their region, their municipality, etc. Then we want to connect some dots, governments, North Stars, connections to CBEN's initiatives and work and what we're doing in the space. And then let's think about this from a CBEN membership perspective. So, what are all the different areas from which you might be joining us as a CBEN member, and what are the ways to get involved in this talent marketplace work based on that perspective and where you're coming from in that way. So excited to have you all joining us here today, excited to talk through all these things. Just as a reminder, make sure you stay on mute. Feel free to come on camera. We're happy to see your faces, but make sure you stay on mute. And any questions you have, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll also be pausing and stopping at the end for other questions to ask you in the chat and other moments when we can take questions from the audience. So just a little housekeeping there. All right. Anything else? Awesome. Thank you all for putting in the chat. All right, Amber, I'm going to hand it over to you to start talking marketplaces.
Awesome, awesome. Well, it's so good to see, again, many of you longtime friends and new friends. Your gold medal moments are really giving me some inspiration. Kelly, I don't think I would have made it if I had to teach a child how to drive in the snow, mainly because I didn't know how to do that until I moved to Michigan, and that was very scary. But welcome. We are just so excited to be able to chat with all of you today. Some of you are, again, new to CBEN. Some of you have been around CBEN for a while. But what we're excited to share with you today is the work we've been doing with governments. And I'm going to use governments broadly because we've been working in partnership with the National Governors Association to learn and walk alongside states, territories, tribal nations, and even some municipalities who are bringing the idea of a not just a skills-based economy to life, but are starting to use talent marketplaces to accomplish that. So really being able to scale. So before we get into the details of how they're doing that, I wanted to start with a grounding of like, what is a marketplace? And these are things that we use every single day. And back to human forums for long, long time ago, a marketplace is a structured exchange of goods, services, or valuables between businesses, consumers, and entities, right? And if we look back, that picture on the top left is medieval square, right? A farmer's market. How do I bring my goods that I've grown into a space where other people could buy them. How do we exchange? Do we barter? Do we have coins that we use? What are we using to exchange those pieces? And then as we've moved into modern times, you can start to see a farmers market again starting to scale. That's Farmers Market Arcade in California. And now in this day and age, how all of us are using marketplaces at scale through new digital platforms that say, you know what, we can now access goods and services across the globe through these again marketplaces that are built, Amazon, all the fun things that you're on constantly. Some of us in the private sector have been using LinkedIn and Indeed to do some of that work, to try to find opportunities for work or talent at scale. And so, what's unique about this moment in time is that, again, all of these things have existed. There's always been some kind of government role in making sure that these are healthy marketplaces that people can trust. That when I go to that marketplace, that the produce is of high quality. And maybe Emily, you can go to the next slide because I think that's the one that has the kind of what public marketplaces do, right? A lot of the places where you live, where I live in Pensacola, Florida, every Saturday, there is a farmer's market where the government has said, here's a piece of land for all of you to set up. We've made sure and vetted the vendors who are coming. They provide quality products. Maybe the USDA has signed off that that apple is really good and not going to poison you, right? So being able to say, here's a forum. There's also a way we exchange currency. We have the US dollar that we're using, or maybe we have machines that allow us to take currency from other places and put it to use to buy the things we want to buy at that market. And that's because, again, there's good legal frameworks. There's a good way to check the quality of the goods and services. You know that if you're a business, you know that if you receive that currency from someone, that it really is going to be a true dollar that you can use to grow your business, right? And so there's a comptroller of the currency that says, this is the way we're going to exchange these goods or services. This is the currency, how much value it holds, and how we're going to, again, use that, and then bringing new infrastructures, tools, and utilities to help us scale that interaction and have access to goods. So it's the same reason we feel comfortable in a stock market. It's the same reason I hesitate to bring this up a little bit just because it might get a little political, but healthcare markets, right? We've started to see other places where the public sector is stepping in and saying, we have a role in bringing forward a marketplace where, again, people can find the things that they need in much easier fashion. And oh my gosh, because Josh Laney put this in there. I have to tell you, Josh Laney texted me that there is a tamale vendor at my farmer's market in Pensacola that comes from Alabama. So again, he travels all the way from Alabama. He can bring his Pensacola, Florida. I can buy those because we have a currency defined, right? So again, you start to see, won't belabor it, but why marketplaces matter, and again, why the public sector. So as we think about not just the public sector helping to facilitate this, now we're starting to see, how do we do this around talent? And so this is where we're seeing a really great way of, again, governments testing and saying, we're not trying to replace a market, we're trying to help make them possible. We're trying to make that possible by, again, setting some standards, building infrastructure, making sure that the signaling that's happening on the supply and demand side, whether that's talent and people with skills can find opportunity and jobs. We want to make sure those signals are quality, that the currency used to connect people to that opportunity can be trusted, and that, again, we can go to a common place to find, if we're talented, find opportunity, or if we have an opportunity, we can go find talent local to us. And so this is where, again, governments are starting to test and move in this direction and finding a way to bring a talent marketplace to life. So the next slide is, what is the information then that states are trying to set up? What's the information that we are wanting to be able to exchange between these entities, right? We want to make sure that residents are skilled residents. There are so many people who have skills from a lot of different places, whether that's through a degree pathway, an apprenticeship pathway, a workforce training program pathway. I was just talking with our friend Deb at Credential Engine that you might have someone coming through accessing SNAP benefits. They get SNAP ENT, education and training dollars. There's a lot of ways, our military, that we invest in our colleagues and our friends in our neighborhoods to be skilled. And we want to make sure that those residents, our friends, our neighbors are able to find good opportunity based on their skills, not just on where they gain those skills or how they gained them. And so they're shifting that currency to be, again, about skills. Employers, then, they're really looking to help their employer communities provide a good quality signal about what is the labor market demand today. How do I know this? So again, in the US, we've kind of done this, whether through the Department of Labor or again, states have been doing this of surveying employers and saying, like, what skills do you need? Where's the labor market going? But they weren't saying, what skills do you need? They were saying, what's the job title? And what we're now seeing is everyone saying, you know what? The job title is not telling me enough about what people need to know and be able to do to access that opportunity. I really want to be able to get the skills that people need. And so building ways for employers and medium, small size, large employers in these communities to better signal in a much more timely way the things that they need through skills. And then helping all of the people who provide learning. Again, we just said there's lots and lots of ways we publicly invest in the development of skills through education and training from pre-K to gray, right? How do all the people who provide that learning use that language of skills to build those programs at quality and not just build content and programs, but to say those skills were actually validated per human, per person, per resident. And that person now has, again, a trusted currency of skills that they can go take into this marketplace and use to find and define their opportunities. So that's the what we're seeing, again, marketplaces, the talent marketplace, why governments are stepping in and saying, how do we help build the infrastructure and tools that make sure these marketplaces can be trusted and used and scaled. So, what are the public things, the policy type things? So, if you're real interested in this from a policy perspective, there's all kinds of fun things happening and interesting things, I should say. Maybe you wouldn't find them fun, and maybe you would just find them interesting. But these are the roles that we're seeing governments play and starting to build talent marketplaces. So they, not surprisingly, again, we have always had some kind of quality lever around what types of learning we allow public dollars to be expended upon. So maybe we have an accreditor, maybe we have new workforce Pell requirements, maybe we have our ETPL list, things that we say this is the type of quality learning that we agree people should be able to access. And so it's taking those lists, if you will, or collections of pathways and saying, here's what is quality. And we want to make sure that we're presenting those in a trusted way to both employers and to our residents to say, these are the things that are quality and that will deliver skills for you. And again, there are public funds available to help support you in getting those skills. The other piece that you're starting to see is states themselves make changes to the ways that they're connecting with that talent. So they are actually states removing degree requirements and shifting to skills-based hiring. We also see that in the private sector. A lot of our large employers are saying we want to be able to broaden our scope of talent resourcing and saying we want to look at anyone based on their skills, not just, again, if they have a particular credential. And so the legal frameworks for hiring are also shifting and creating space and room, whether that's the Office of Personnel Management or other folks shifting to skills-based hiring, making those there, and then being able to incentivize employers for hiring local people based on skills. So that might be tax incentives that economic development entities might offer to employers to hire skilled individuals from a particular locale or from a particular state. So again, a lot shifting in that frame. And then this whole idea of comptroller of the currency is really thinking about how do we build trust in the skills themselves that are in the skills languages that are being used in these marketplaces. The example I often use here is in the US, when we were building currencies, we had different types of currencies operating. We had railroad currency, we had cotton currency, we had banks, and banks were all desperate, right? But you couldn't go spend your cotton money in the railroad bank, and so vice versa. Or so really thinking about, we actually have in the US a comptroller of the currency, in the Fed that is monitoring our currency, making sure we're all what the US dollar is, how does it maintain its value, and then how does it maintain its value from state to state, right? So that's where we're starting to see new ways for governments to bring validated skills and govern those validated skills statements and assertions and quality of those assertions in these marketplaces. And then again, just thinking about the utilities that can scale this. So what are what's the ways that we can match as much talent to opportunity as possible? That while my farmers market is lovely here in Pensacola, and I'm glad that I can get the tamales from Josh's hometown of Phoenix, Alabama, we want to make sure that those tamales then can be sold everywhere, right? And so people are starting to think about, again, what are the ways that they validate those pathways and then encourage as many exchanges as possible so that, again, as many people are connecting to those jobs and employers can find the talent they need. And then this is where the technology really, 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 really comes into play. And you've probably heard about LERs and skills-based job description generators and credential registries. And these are the tools that technology tools that are being deployed to capture that data, validate it that it's real, and move it and allow people to use that data to, again, connect talent and opportunity. So just a really quick, again, rundown, kind of nerdy rundown of moving from farmers market to talent marketplaces. And hopefully you are starting to see now where your particular role might fit as governments are building these types of talent marketplaces. And the thing that, again, we are really excited about and why we find a lot of governments investing in this, Emily, on the next slide, is just that as they're building these talent marketplaces, again, it's not because they don't have skilled people in their governance and their residents of places, whether they are, again, are a tribal community or they are a territory or a state. Again, we have lots of homegrown talent right where we are. But what is leaving those folks out of the economy is that the currency of skills are not clear and they can't use those, again, to get connected to those opportunity. And so building trust in that currency of skills is a major role that, again, governments are trying to seek to create the opportunity to do. And at CBEN, we've been helping to figure out, especially that currency, right? So competency-based education, when we started this role about 10 years ago, was really saying on the education side, how do I make decisions about a person's advancement based on competencies and skills instead of seat time? So we've been spending a lot of time thinking about how we validate skills and use that in decision making. And that is now the concept that has moved out from an institution of learning all the way up into, again, how do we have talent marketplaces that says that is the currency that we're all using. So Emily, you want to talk about the work we've been doing with lots and lots of partners, many of you on this call, to think about how we define that currency and build trust in it.
Yes, indeed. You're here today, the sort of like, if you think about the entity that's trying to help governments do a lot of this work, is the Center for Skills by CBEN. We are an like institution inside of CBEN. And what we're trying to do at a very broad, high level is build trust in skills, get the right people around the right tables to more effectively do that work of what is the North Star goal that a government is trying to achieve by creating one of these public talent marketplaces. I wanted to really quickly ground everyone in some of the more foundational work that the Center for Skills has been doing in the past year or so to set us up for what's now trying to walk alongside governments as they build these public talent marketplaces. The first one is the Partnership for Skills Validation. That was an effort where we were trying to get incredibly clear across sectors of our economy to say, what do we mean when we say validated skills? What does the process of skills validation actually look like? What does it look like for employers trying to do hiring? And how can we use the same principles of quality that those employers are using for hiring or want to be using for hiring across any other sector, across post-secondary education, across K-12, across government, public sector, military, etc. So we gathered leaders from all of the organizations you see here on your screen to form a core partnership that then worked through various sprints to produce resources, and we'll have a link to get you to those resources later on in the presentation. But those resources were really trying to answer the question of let's speak with one voice and let's say together, this is what we mean when we say a skill is validated, when we say that the a quality skills validation method can be present in any of these places of our economy. And again, that was really foundational work. I'll give you a little bit of the vision here, what that group came up with. But that was really foundational work to get us to this notion of now let's think about those validated skills as being the currency that we're trying to control within these public talent marketplaces. So I won't read you this slide, but those core partners, that partnership for skills validation, came to some of these like very clear statements that planting a flag to say, if we're going to make a skills-based world and a skills-based economy a reality, that means we're going to have to build trust in skills as the currency for talent. That happens in a few ways. And again, we'll share links to all the resources you that we've created through that partnership so you can dig into a little bit more of what we mean when we say quality. Now, the Center for Skills is really part of an initiative that is powering trust in skills. What's the next phase of that work? And Amber, should I hand it back to you to talk through the pieces of that initiative that we're working on right now?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Emily, for grounding us in just the practice of skills validation. When we say that, I think that's something we're all still learning together around. But again, we want to be here to help facilitate that community and those definitions and the quality standards. So thank you for covering that part. So how do we take those skills out of all these different places that learning happens, and again use that as the trusted currency? So part of this next line of work that we will spend the next 18 months doing with the support of our friends at Walmart is in deep partnership with the National Governors Association, and being able to support public governments who are seeking to strengthen their public talent marketplaces. And so we will be working deeply in with states, walking alongside still for the Skills in the States cohort in particular. And then we have room to work with up to 10 states deeply. So in similar way that we helped Alabama build their talent triad, and then we are now working deeply with Arkansas and their launch marketplace, being able to, again, walk alongside, help people understand a little bit about what they're trying to build. And as you can imagine, if you go back to just all the places that start to administer public funds for learning, that could be up to 14 agencies. In Alabama, that was 16 agencies. And so how do we collectively act around this is a key challenge of building the marketplaces, because these are not things that we as states and governments have been used to doing. Having this many hands being able to breathe life into this is a challenge. And so being able to provide project support, being able to help with work plans, and being able to connect you with national partners who can shore up maybe what needs to how to bring that work alongside. So again, if we're talking just learning opportunities, K-12 to gray, we're kind of doing a little bit of air traffic control support in the states and with our state leaders to say, who are the national partners that understand what skills validation looks like in K-12? Or what does skills validation look like in apprenticeship? And knowing that we know the national partners you can call to get that deep dive into how your work fits up into a talent marketplace. And then also being able to support the decisions that states are making around the data and technology infrastructure. And again, how we get the utility in place for skills to move as easily as possible and be that currency. So as we're doing that deep work, we will be trying to, that middle bucket is about how do we share out as fast as possible what we're learning. And that, again, a lot of this is new. This is not infrastructure that in the US we've typically had. There are other governments across the globe who are building similar types of infrastructures and ways. But again, what's unique about the US is how much of a federated system we will be engaging in, right? Everyone has, no one wants a national register, not registry. People actually do want a national registry. People have today kind of said, like, I don't want the federal government to give me a learning and employment record. I want that to come from either my state or somewhere else. And so all the context and the ways that these decisions are lifted and governed will be documenting and pushing out that information as quickly as possible. We also have the ability to support state legislators with some office hours. There are going to be times when it's not clear 100% what are the different ways that policy or legislative action needs to be taken in a way that builds a trusted marketplace. And so being able to, again, just be a trusted friend to help think through the policy implications and create some guidance for state legislators who are having to think about this and govern in new ways. And then getting really nerdy on that last bucket is getting in on that skills data and the ways that it's validated, the ways that information is documented. So how do we have per person their skills assertion and evidence of their performance of that skill in a way that is, again, quality documented? And then how do we use new AI tools to scale a lot of this work, but doing that with humans in the loop and in a way that people, again, feel like they can trust not just what they're getting, but that these are, again, government assets that respect their privacy and security as well. So that's that last forum that we'll continue to work on with all of you, and being able to think about, again, how do all of these actions build more trust in the skills and the marketplaces that are trying to shift to that currency. So how are we doing that? Again, it's a lot of people. And I think this is what we've been learning as we've been getting in with governments is, again, sometimes people would come in and say, I've been tasked with leading our shift to skills-based hiring. You've been tasked with credentials of value and quality and skills validation, but we didn't know that what we were doing is supposed to fit together in some way. And so being able to really say, like, how do we look at the elephant and describe what we see from where we're at, but also understand that I'm just seeing the tail and you've got the trunk. And so, but we're all looking at the same thing, and again, building towards a common direction. And that's where, again, CBEN's trying to be helpful, empowering that collaboration and being able to help build marketplaces that work. The next little slide there is, so as we've been doing that work, again, with 22 states, territories, tribal nations, is that at the end of the day, these are the four components, again, that they're trying to bring together. And it goes back to that just residents, the talent, the job opportunities from their employers, and again, what are the learning pathways that deliver those skills? If you think about just very easily those things, is that you've got government taking actions, right, and being able to have different entities often setting a North Star goal, saying how do we have things in place that enable talent marketplaces to emerge, and then all the agencies that are really bringing that to life on the three different colors. So learning providers, again, are corralling themselves, working together to think about what are the skills, what are the quality learning programs, and what's the assessments I have to be able to deliver on to validate skills for the people that I am teaching or learning with. How do I then document that data and get that into a way that it can be used? So that's skilled and competency data in the middle. And then also, how do I make sure I have a quality job signal from the employers and what the job market is? And so this is where, really trying to seeing states shift to getting rid of ghost jobs in a talent marketplace. Or how do I know that that's really an employer? Because if I'm going to send a resident to that job, I want to make sure that's a real job with a real role and a real salary behind it. I don't want to just ask people to get on here and search for something different. And I think that's no, not to knock on some of our public sector efforts, like Indeed and other things, but what this is saying there's somebody that's checked that. Again, my government has made sure that this is something I can, again, rely on and trust, and that the referrals and things that I'm getting are true and real. They're not promising me a job necessarily, but again, that it's a real employer or this is a real resident with that skill. And so just sitting around and imagining, again, the workforce cabinet, or maybe your workforce transformation agency, or maybe even your governor's office, looking at this from that perspective means there's lots of agencies, again, that have to move and shift and take on different roles. And so that's what we've been documenting is what are those different roles? What are the different agencies who are carrying water around these components? And again, what are the legislative actions that people are taking to make this stick and sustainable over time? So Emily, you want to get people to engage with that a little bit in the chat?
Yeah, so thinking about what perspective, what sort of slice of that pie you're coming in from, or looking at this larger initiative and set of problems to be solved from, we wanted to just ask the folks who are joining us today to think about how your perspective directly connects to the North Star goals that your particular like sector or piece of this pie is trying to accomplish. So getting at some of what Amber was talking about, that example of the elephant, the goals that you're actually working towards every day in your organization might be slightly distinct from other folks, but they might ultimately fit together in service of a larger North Star goal for the government that you are a part of, be that a state government, territory government, tribal government, municipality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just take a moment to put in the chat, what are the main directives, think outcomes, impacts, whatever, that your organization specifically has been tasked with addressing? And then are they different or are there other ones that are actually really meaningful to you that get you out of bed in the morning? And we're thinking about goals like trying to increase labor force participation in the state, trying to increase enrollment and outcomes at a given educational institution, trying to create skills evidence as an actual educational outcome, trying to hire using skills to do truly skills-based hiring at an employer, trying to get employers into a talent marketplace. These are the kind of like directives or larger goals we might be talking about. And though I'm sure that all of you have really worthwhile goals that your organization is working towards, we also want to hear from you. The more what are the more personal or impactful goals that you also are a little bit working towards as well? So I just wanted to throw that out there, give people a chance to engage with this in terms of like, from my organization and my perspective on this problem, what are the big, audacious goals that we're working towards every day? So starting to see people throw a few in the chat already. Yeah, identify credentials that are actually serving as signals in the economy. Incredibly important work. Credentials awarded, dollars invested. Awesome. Yeah, trying to make alignment between these like sectors and perspectives real. That alignment is critical work. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And I'm already seeing so much of things about trying to get focused on skills, not because we don't want credential attainment and degrees, not that because degrees are like not incredibly valuable, but because we want to be focused on what is the actual unit of currency we can use to help people move around in talent marketplaces. And that skills, regardless of how they were obtained, where they were obtained, or how long it took to obtain them. Awesome. All right, keep throwing these in the chat. We're going to keep it moving and talk about North Star goals, but really, really helpful to see how people are thinking about this and what perspective they're coming at it from.
So what I think is, again, we've had the pleasure and opportunity to learn again alongside all of you as you're building, is just seeing the how the diversity of solutions and things people are trying to work on can be solved in a marketplace. And so we have worked with governments from every political spectrum, I think, at this point, and thinking about the ways that they are hoping to implement this. But that, again, this is a common infrastructure. Just like you might think about highways, of people seeing it as a utility that's going to help multiple uh, folks in the community come to the table and find what they need. And so, oop, make sure everybody's on. There we go. So what are some of the things that we're seeing again is I'm going to just start with the top is again, some of those North Star goals. Each of you could quote something that you're being given to work on again, within the context of your governance structure. Right. And so, where we see clarity and where we have good oversight. And I think why you see Connecting Talent to Opportunity challenge that is currently available from the federal government is that it requires cabinet level oversight. And we've heard this from governor's offices. We've heard this from tribal nations, again, that having the president or having the governor or having um, the core elected leader be able to say multiple agencies, you have to work together. And we're going to make sure that you are accountable for those things by establishing, again, a North Star goal or something that's bigger. What has shifted, and we'll be able to get some of this research out, hopefully as quickly as possible. I mean, I keep saying like maybe next week is just, we've had our dear friend Julie Peller, who is some of you may know from federal policy space, is documenting how governments are making these shifts. What is it that legislators are putting into place? Is it some kind of, against actual state legislation? Is it an executive order? What are the things that are establishing this and creating that multi-agency role and responsibility? What are those agencies then accountable for? What shifted is a lot of them were accountable early on for credential attainment. And many of you know when I was at Lumina, that certainly has been our goal for a long time. And many states set credential attainment goals. What we're starting to see is people to say, yes, we want attainment. As Emily said, we need people who have skills and credentials. But what we need is to make sure that those skills have return on investment and we can connect people to the economic opportunity that's going to give them the freedom that they want. And that is a shift that we're seeing. So those North Star goals starting to move to out in California recently, a couple weeks ago, I was hearing economic freedom. And some states, I'm hearing increasing labor force participation rate that leads to household income per capita growth. So again, you're starting to see broader connections to what that means. And then saying it means to accomplish those bigger goals, again, we got to have all sides of this marketplace working and being able to think about how skills are developed, validated, and used, how they're stored, what are the different ways that we monitor that data and reporting process using administrative data, and then again, what's the deep level of engagement that we have to have with employers and with our residents to be able to steward that and to be able to build on that. So we'll be releasing this in further detail in the coming weeks again, but this is the framework that we're seeing and have validated within those 22 states, territories, and tribal nations that are building, and we've been privileged to walk alongside.
And can I just add really quickly before we move to the next slide? One of the reasons we as CBEN and the Center for Skills are coming to you with this framework is because the part of the work of walking alongside governments in creating this is trying to pull these pieces together to try and do that powerful convening of all of these different sectors are working on these things, and let's make sure they're not working in silos. Let's make sure they have a common place to come and talk about this and pull these initiatives together. And that's like the core work that CBEN is trying to do, especially with these 10 states that we're going to be more deeply embedded with over the next 18 months.
And so this is the work. And Devin, I know I was just seeing your design and Melanie booth. I know you are both design thinkers, and I think we even probably have friends on from a design lab. But this is really sitting down, and this is when we sat with our consult team and said, this is again the framework. These are what people, the components of a marketplace. Put the dots on the things you have, put the dots on things that you wish you had, or circle the things that you want to build next, so that as you're continuing to execute and building, again, we can help you build a clear roadmap of and make sure that the dots truly do connect. Because what we don't want to do, and our team in Alabama and Arkansas, we then will take use cases and say, okay, this is the type of resident we're trying to serve. Does this marketplace serve that resident? Does it serve that large employer? Does it serve the small employer? Making sure that there's testing, making sure that there's, again, good engagement with the populations of individuals that are going to serve that. And as we get deeper into that work, we learn about cool preferences that people have. And so in the Alabama work, we were working with an organization that represented individuals, job seekers who had disabilities. And what they said was really would be useful to hear from the employer in that trusted job description is what kind of benefits might be available to them and how do they know where some of the bus stops are, for instance, or other things that, again, help them access talent, that opportunity and data that the state had. And all they needed to do was to make that visible in the talent marketplace. So we, through user engagement and through testing, start to see again how that stewardship and how responsible engagement make sure that these marketplaces truly serve people. I know the story I always use is the other lesson we learned is you get job descriptions thrown at you every day, and AI assumes, like, I know, Amber, you want to be a cat sitter because guess what? I do love cats and I have three, but I don't want to do that in my professional life. I'd be thinking about skills. So, but being able to say, don't send me those job descriptions anymore is not an opportunity in our current private sector platforms. Our public sector, Alabama said that's important. We want to know that that's a preference of our resident and be able to connect them to the opportunities they are seeking and that they can trust the job descriptions and the jobs that they are being matched with. So again, being able to have those feedback loops are really, really critical. And I think that's been something great to see of state governments, again, kind of every political spectrum, really valuing about how they empower their residents and again their employer community and their learning providers with these tools, and not just making policy decisions based on what they can see, but really is saying again, how do we open this up for everyone to be able to see and access. And Emily, we have to fly because I talked too much on that front part, but here are just again some of the things you want me to do the calls to action real quick.
Go for it. I'm answering
Okay.
questions in the Q&A. So
Oh,
people keep questions coming in the chat, and Amber will talk a little bit about specific CBEN like help and specific actions you can take depending on where you're coming from.
yes, awesome. Thanks, Emily. So, from a governance perspective, if you are a governor's office, a workforce cabinet member, a Department of Labor, workforce commerce, higher ed, K 12, please know state data, state longitudinal data offices. We are here to help you do that audit to be able to see what do you have already existing in your ecosystem, what is it that you would like to build next, and then again, are there national partners or others who can help you build that? We are not here to say like we are here to help be your one-stop shop, but to say through partnership, we know, and there are people who want to help you, but being able to have a clear audit so that you're in the driver's seat as your community leaders to be able to tell those of us who are out in the ecosystem where you need support. So being able to do that audit, we can help you do that. On the next side, if you are a learning provider, maybe you have, again, you're from pre-K to gray, you are doing something to develop the talent of your communities. And so whether, again, you're a faculty member, you're on the board of regents, what you can do is make sure that you are using quality signals from the marketplace, right? We want to make sure that we're building relevant uh, credential programs that lead to the skills people need and that we're assessing those skills in a performance-based way. And then I'm documenting that in a way that that individual can then go use that in a talent marketplace. So that's really our role is how do we think about learning and skills validation as much as possible. If we're a learning provider and making sure, again, we're handing that agency back over to the individual to own that evidence and use that. If you are someone who is running a state longitudinal data system, or maybe are responsible for UI wage records, or you're responsible for WIOA metrics, or you're responsible for thinking about, again, access to benefits, you all have a role to play in thinking about how, again, we give agency to individuals to own that data, and then also making sure that that data can inform and be used in trusted ways. This is a big one, in trusted ways by our residents, in particular, people who are sometimes at their most vulnerable moment when they're having to come to us and say, you know what, my job was eliminated and am going to access unemployment benefits. How can you help me find my next role based on skills? And how do we turn to individuals and say, instead of giving them a checklist or building kind of a resume, what we're going to do is say, you have assets, you have skills and things that you can use in this economy, and we're going to help you find those opportunities based on skills and match you with talent. That's why that data is so important and why we want to be able to use that in these new ways. And then if you're on the employer side or you're responsible for employer engagement, so maybe we work very, very closely with friends at Chambers. And Natalie, I know you're on here from Indiana. Thinking about the roles that we partner with, either commerce, economic development, state chambers, to say, how do we help the business community come together and better signal together what's needed? Also, we hear from employers all the time. A state might try to engage them with 5 different agencies. Well, let's maybe not send 5 different people in to have that conversation and tighten the lift on our employers as well to give us that quality signal so that our learning providers can build quality programs and we can match people to that opportunity. And so, again, the labor, Emily, on the next slide, the employers and the job market piece. So, employers, public and private sector, engage, get involved. My biggest thing I would say to public and private sector, y'all are all hiring in the same industries, but you're having separate conversations about the skills you need, which I think is fascinating. You're all hiring nurses, you're all hiring truck drivers, you're all hiring, right? But we are having separate conversations about what those skills are and what those needs may be and how we might connect to that talent. So get together, find forums to do that. And again, be able to think about integrations that you might need for your applicant tracking systems, your human resource systems, and then being able to now shift your hiring and talent management practices in the same way that education's changing, the way that they monitor progress and award credentials. You're having the same conversation about how you use skills to hire and promote people, and that there's resources there. So that's a quick rundown. The next step is just saying that what we have also learned on the next slide is just that it's going to feel like a three-legged race. This is like Alabama's a triad, right? These are 3 things we're trying to bring together. And all I could think about was like being young and being attached to someone and be like, we're running, but I'm not sure my right leg is matched to your left leg right now. We might fall down a little bit. This is going to feel again, all sides of the market right now are shifting and changing. And so being open to be vulnerable and say, you know what, I'm trying to change over here too, but I'm not sure how what I do, again, connects with what you're doing. Or being able to say, you know what, there's really not a lot of good employer engagement going on. How do I, as a learning provider, help engage somebody else that can help me go reach those employers? So just being willing to, again, be vulnerable together and run the three-legged race together. The other piece that we have learned and would just give as advice is to saying this can feel huge. In both the places or the multiple places we've been building, I should say, pick 1 or 2 industries, have all sides of the market there, and design together and learn what it's like to work together, to engage in this talent process together, and then start to layer in more and more and more industries. So whether it's been Navajo Nation or Alabama or Arkansas, we've started in select industries with employers, with learning providers, with those data folks, with government to say, how do we, again, let's build it in this and then move out, move out, move out. So just being willing to sit in that and come up with it together, and knowing that we're here to support you every step of the way, be a neutral convener if you need us to help do some of that work. And then we'll just continue to provide, again, collective guidance from the field. So Emily, you want to take the next slide on some of that skills validation work for employers and learning providers on how to actually do skills validation and provide quality skills data?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I was saying before about the Partnership for Skills Validation, and a reminder, we're recording this webinar. We'll send all this out to you so you don't have to capture it here. But we have a resource center on the CBEN website where you can access all of the resources that came out of that Partnership for Skills Validation, including a lot of stuff on common language and quality frameworks, so that you can get a little deeper into this notion of what is skills validation, what is quality skills validation, what do we mean when we say that we have to include evidence of performance and things like that. This resource center also includes those user personas, a version of the user personas that Amber was talking about before. Again, as CBEN works directly with governments, this is potentially a place where we can get a lot more specific to certain industries, certain geographies, certain target populations. But this is a set of user personas that cross where we see the most common work being done so that you can think about a person like this in these populations. How would a state talent marketplace actually serve them? And how could a person like that move through and interact with given employers, given government services, etc., as they move through an entire talent marketplace journey so that you can think about another way to think about what are the pieces of that framework that exist in my context, that need to exist in my context, that are siloed apart from each other, and that need to start talking. So those user personas are a really good way to start thinking about that. So again, please visit the Partnership for Skills Validation Resource Center. You can download any and all of these resources. We want you to use them, and we want you to think about them as a spark for a conversation you can have in this field in general, but with CBEN specifically. We definitely want to hear from you if you're trying to make skills validation and talent marketplace work happen in general. And then, just as a preview of coming attractions, we were talking about our current initiative, Powering Trust and Skills. One of the big things we're trying to do is create these knowledge products that are really going to guide the decision makers and the governments that are trying to govern these marketplaces as they go through these decisions. We have lots of resources slated to come out over the next few months that are going to be like a perspective and a guide on some of this work governing talent marketplaces, how to think about policy and what's happening across the policy landscape, how to become that comptroller of the currency of skills, the infrastructure, the utilities, the technology, the financing. We're here to provide guidance on all of those things. So you can look at the CBEN newsletter, the CBEN website, CBEN's LinkedIn. As we publish things, we're going to get them out to all of you so that you can continue that building that perspective on all of the skills and talent marketplaces. And now we've got a little bit of time left, so hopefully we can actually take some questions and hear from you all. And I'll take down the slides as well. We've got some great questions in the chat. Why don't we start with one that's really about like different ways to think about definitions of skills. Amber, if you want to talk about this one, and then we'll open it to the floor. People can come off mute as well. But this question is about how is it like, what's the challenge of getting everyone to come to an agreed upon definition of skills so they can become a common currency? Maybe talking a little bit about durable skills and matching across contexts, Amber.
Yeah, yeah. I love this question. Okay, this is where, again, I get really nerd out on the pieces of this. So if we just kind of start with, again, a competency is really the set of knowledge, skills, behavior, context, right? And so how do I understand what it means to know something, to be able to do something with that knowledge, show up with the appropriate behaviors and ways of working and doing, but also in particular context. So I love your question, Bob, about how do you take it from critical thinking from an oil refinery job to a job at a bank, and we absolutely see that. And so we've been working with states, in particular. Our deepest work has been in Alabama across the industry councils to be able to say, okay, what does it mean to have a ready to work skill or a durable skill within one of the industries? I get some application, right? It's what I know, it's what I can do with that. And then being able to move into a place where we're then collecting as much information, and you're talking about it in this way. We're shifting from having taxonomies and static frameworks that say, if it matches this statement in this exactly, then I'm going to count it. And if it doesn't, I'm going to kick it out, right? And that's kind of how our frameworks and taxonomies have worked to date. What we're able to do with technology is actually to take more of that ontological approach, that relational approach that says, I need to know that unique set of knowledge, skills, behaviors, and context, because that means one of two things. It either means that's a job that's not filled, or that means somebody has that skill and they're trying to use it in the labor market. And so we want to understand and be able to break that down. So we're using different ways, again, of kind of capturing that data, different ways of understanding that data, and amassing it over time so we can watch for trends that are happening. So in the talent triad, for instance, there's over 2 million skill statements in the talent triad right now, and those are unique to either a job description or somebody's talent, right, and what they know and can do. And so instead of now, what we do in the triad is use what we call skills packs. So it's understanding again, where are those sets, those unique sets of things that are used, where are they related to each other. And the example that we'll use here is that we were able to then do cross industry analysis and find that people working in agriculture and food production, we're very, very good at following safety protocols and making sure that that food that was being produced wasn't going to harm somebody. Right? We took that skill set over to the folks in healthcare, and they were like, "Can you please bring me those candidates because they understand sterilization, they understand the hospital settings and protocols and how important those are." And so now we're again using that language of skills, but allowing for all the different ways that people might want to talk in a less rigid fashion into one that says all of this currency matters. We're just, again, collecting it up and using it in different ways to bring those four components of knowledge, skills, behavior, context to light. Hopefully that wasn't too out there, but it's definitely thanks to technology that we can do some of these things.
Awesome. Maybe one or two more questions. Please feel free to come off mute.
I have a question. Uh, Amber, based on what you just said, how are organizations or in the work that you all are doing getting around like yes, the skills are being met, the behaviors are there, but that need or for industry experience and like the bias from those who might be a part of the hiring committee and things of that nature.
Yes, yes. So in one of the places we worked, actually getting that resolved was a very hard thing to do. Um, and so being able to, the way the learning providers kind of reconciled that was by inviting the employer to come to their performance-based assessment day, and where they were asking students to actually build a house. It was a construction program. And so what they did was say, come in, we're going to ask you, like, we are delivering skills, and since you're not trusting that signal right now, we're going to show you how we're assessing it. We're going to tell you again what that performance expectation looks like. You can also breathe life into that. If we've missed something about what it means to show up to work on time, then I need to update my rubric and my ways that I'm prompting people to perform and show up to work on time. And so creating that, again, the forum for those the distrust of the signal to be resolved with each other has been really important in shifting the conversation. But then there's also on the employer hiring side, being able to help build tools that if you're going to shift to skills-based hiring, how to actually use that evidence performance in your process so that you can mitigate bias, you can mitigate other things that you're trying to take out of your hiring process by shifting to skills, but there are legacy things happening that are not good measures. And so just supporting those employers in their skills-based talent management processes. So we're seeing states actually bring in folks from Opportunity at Work and lots of organizations that are helping employers to help train employers. And that's honestly, that's been some of the work we've been doing too in some of these states, is just sitting with folks of what's a competency and skill? How do you assess it? How do you think about it? Are we agreeing again that that's the same thing? But it is a big shift, Dr. Lee. So I'm glad that you are bringing that up. And it's just again, we can't change one side of the equation without changing the other, or else people will get stuck, and it won't benefit our neighbors like we hope it would.
Yeah, the other part of that was the need for connection for like apprenticeship programs and such. Um, so yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And but I do think, and I know our Paisy team's on it, there are new opportunities that get created when there's a shared understanding of the competencies and the performance expectations, because then I can truly say, I don't care where you learned that. If you can do this, that's what I'm really looking at. And so maybe you did learn that in a work embedded learning opportunity, or maybe you learned that in an apprenticeship, or maybe you learned that at a, in your community because you were fundraising for your church. All of those things demonstrate that you have the ability to do that role and perform that competency. Oh my gosh, we're
Awesome.
at time.
It's okay. I'm going to stop us here. Thank you so much for all of the engagement. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for the great questions. We'll be sharing out this recording and materials with everyone so you have an opportunity to look at it. And please do get in touch with us if you want to talk about these things more deeply, or if you have a, government level project that you really want to be part of this initiative. We are all ears. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.